Welcome to For All the Meeples. And I mean that. All meeples are welcome. Today we're looking at Atiwa. It is a game designed by Uwe Rosenberg. It was illustrated by Andy Elkerton. And it's published by Lookout Games. And I tripped over every one of those. So I apologize. It's for 1 to 4 players, ages 12 and up. I'll let you decide. That's more of a suggestion. It plays in 30 minutes per person, and if you take away the setup, which is not that bad actually. I originally I thought it was a bad setup, but it's not. It's not a lot at all. It's just the supply board that takes a while. Pardon me. You take that away, 30 minutes per player seems about right. Granted, I've only played this in solo, so I want to go over just a brief summation of the game, how it's played. It is essentially a worker placement game, farming game, involving fruit bats. They are a main component of the game, and part of the theme as well. I've got the board set up as you can see, and I'll go through each thing. You play with workers, meeples, right here. And in the case of a solo game, you play with 3 sets of meeples. So you get 9 turns in a row before you take meeples back. Only you're using these 3 colors of meeples, red, yellow, blue, and you are matching them to the round that you're in. And these action tiles cover up the rounds. And you'll see that in round 1, it's red meeples. So for a solo play, I'm playing my first 3 turns with red meeples. The second round is played with yellow, and the third with blue. It's after the third that when you're in the 4th round, you can take your red back and start over again. You go red, take the yellow back, do yellow, and so on and so forth till you're done, till the game is over. So that's essentially your workers are having to perform tasks, and those tasks are easily laid out on the board here. You have many choices. You can take a location card at the bottom here. Now, one thing to notice, you start with every game with a location card, and it's a village. Goes in the 3rd spot every time. This is your tableau. So you can build a community here, and that's the idea. One that will flourish with families, trained families who understand your knowledge of the area and of the beneficial bat population. So you can, with your turn, acquire more land with one of these locations if you have the right amount to pay for it. This gray area here is if you want to increase the difficulty level of the game. So I've been playing on this one, of course, because I'm not doing very well. My highest score is 90 so far, and we'll get to that in a little while. But again, then you have more chances and actions that you can take. You can take any of these particular things that are listed on the board wherever you place your token, your worker. And the last place here is the terrain tiles, because you can place one of your workers here and take one of these terrain tiles. You can also place it here and take a tree and one of these terrain tiles just without looking at it. Terrain tiles, like location tiles, are important to build out your tableau. And you'll notice that each one is, I'll put it here, each one is segmented but you can only use 8 spots on each one of them. And each spot is assigned to something, and if it isn't, and if there isn't in this card, if there's an empty spot, you can use that spot for anything as long as another one of those is on the board. So if you want to use a goat, and there's a goat already placed, then you can place another goat. So that's important. They will take your resources, which are, and they're here. The resources are wild animals, which we can see here. They are trees, fruit, untrained families, and goats. The other 2, resources that you get are bats, and there's gold. As you can see on the board, there's plenty of opportunity to get all of these resources. A couple of spots that I want to talk about. This spot in particular that shows an arrow going into a family with a bat symbol on it. And that's to indicate that if you have a family in one of your huts, in your village or town or settlement or farmstead, you need to train that family. And in order to train that family, you have to train it on the board in one of these ways. So you can place your meeple there, and you are able to take a bat and gold, 1 gold, but you're also able to train a family to accept bats. So a closer look at it would be that's the trained side. There's the untrained side. There's the trained side with the bat. So that's one of the reasons you want to do that is because at the end of your turn, if you have any untrained families in your tableau, you risk pollution. Well, you'll draw from this pouch right here. And if I had one I look at the other side, I'm lucky, I get 1 gold for that side, but the unfortunate part is I cause pollution in my community. So you'll want to train your families because you don't want these. And these are actually negative at the end of the game. So you don't want to go into this bag. Oops, sorry. You don't want to go into this bag. The other thing, as I said, I mentioned was that there are bats. So on this particular one, I get a chance to take a bat and a gold. So I would just reach in, grab myself a gold. That's now part of my supply. And now I have a bat. Where do I place that bat? There are places on your location tiles and on, the terrain tiles where you can place your bats. So here, clearly, you can see bat, 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 right? But on here, we see that we have an untrained family, so we can't put it on top of the untrained family. We can, however, put it on that space because there is a bat icon on there. If this was trained, if the family was trained, you could put the bat on top of the family. Another reason to train your families so you can get more bats. Bats will go into scoring later, but bats are beneficial. They're obviously worth points. You want to get those points. Something else. So these 2 squares here, if you place your... Oh, excuse me. That's not what I'm placing. If I place my worker here, I'm allowed to use this icon, this nature icon, we'll call it, right at the top here on the terrain cards. If you can multiply the number of those symbols, how many you have. Now I only have 1, so I could get 1 gold based on that if I play here. Also, if I have 4 of these cards with a symbol, I can then turn 1 family to trained. If I have 4 of those. So I can do these 2 moves if I have that symbol on my terrain card, and the number of symbols equals the amount of gold you get. And if I have 4 or more terrain cards with that symbol, I can then train a family. And the other one is pretty much the opposite. You train that many families based on how many of those symbols you have in your tableau. And if you have 4 of them, you get 1 gold. And that's essentially the board that you're playing. So a round consists, for me anyway, we'll go with the solo. A round consists of me placing my meeples, we'll say I put one there, and collecting, as I've placed, I've collected these resources, trees, and fruit goes on trees. You can also get, terrain that has the fruit in one of the sections for you, so you can play it directly onto your tableau without putting it on top of a tree. Also, I was able to take the terrain card by placing there. I can flip automatically. This is an automatic. You take, this one's interesting because you can take the family that's untrained and immediately train them and put them down on your tableau, which is great. But remember, you have to have a space assigned for them. And even if you do have one family on a particular village or terrain card, you cannot place a family in an empty space as well, even though that applies to all the other supplies you have. It doesn't apply to the family. So that's an interesting point. But one of the things you do at the end of your turn, if I've done these 3 things, my turn is over. I then go through my maintenance phase. And the maintenance phase is listed on this incredible reference card. This is just so good. It really is really, really well done. So it will walk you through each of the things that you have to do on your phase. You start with income. So income is based on the number of trained families you have in your tableau. In this case, I have 1. I get 1 gold. If you have any untrained families in your tableau, this is where you draw from the bag, place the pollution, which is a negative. You don't want that. Pardon me. And then you move on to wild animals, trees, and fruit. So here is where your supply board comes in. What's really interesting about this, it's amazing scoring, is that what you've taken from the supply to put into your tableau affects what else you will put into your tableau as a bonus at the end of the round. So you'll notice here, I didn't take any wild animals, so I'm not allowed to take any trees. If I had taken 3 of those animals and placed them somewhere, I would be able to take 1 tree. Then I would place that tree on my tableau. Now I go down to trees. I see that I can get 1 fruit, so I can place a fruit on that tree. And the last thing I get to take is bats. So this row is 1 bat at this point, and I can place that, because I've trained this family, on a trained bat. Or on the family. I can put the bat on a trained family. So that's a really interesting way of gaining your resources. I love this mechanic. It also shows you what you'll be scoring at the end of the game as you move this forward, because the points will grow as they go, because each one of these furthest to the left or furthest to the right that's empty is the point value you can add up and put on your final score. So you have to decide, how far do I want to go with these? Now, One of the things you have to realize too is that things come at a cost at times. If I want to buy, there's really only two things on the board as far as actions are concerned above taking any of the location tiles that cost. And it's this one. 1 gold gets you 2 sheep, or 2 gold get you 2 untrained families. That's payment that you have to do. Here is where you're paying to get more space for your tableau, more locations. And you'll notice that the town has 4 spaces for families. The village has 3. The settlement has 2, and the farmstead has 1. So you have to consider what you can afford and what you'll pay to get it. Because here it's 1 gold and 1 tree that can get me a farmstead. Well, I can do that, and that's great. But if you want to get, say, a village to have 3 more spots for 3 more trained families, which give you points in the end, and also can house bats, which could potentially give you points in the end, you're going to have to come up with more money. You're going to have to come up with 7 gold and 5 trees. Now, those come from your tableau. The trees or fruit or whatever you have to pay in order to take something comes from your tableau. And we'll get to why you're taking things from your tableau other than just trees to pay for these, because you can see that it's just trees and gold here. However, the next step on the maintenance phase, I'm going to go through that in a minute because I want to skip it to go to feeding your family. Any family that you have on your tableau has to be fed. And you calculate how much you have to feed these people by the family row minus the goat row. So right now the family row is showing 1. And the goat row, I'm not showing any. I haven't shown any. So 1 minus 0 is 1. I have to pay 1 of my resources to feed my family at this point. A resource can be fruit to pay for, in fact, it's on the card here. It can be a bat if it's an untrained family, because trained families would never do that. Gold is worth 1. A fruit is worth 1. Wild animals that you have on your tableau are worth 2 points, and goats are worth 3. So depending on how many families you have on that tableau, if you have 6 families and you need to feed them, it's going to cost you. Just remember that when you are placing things on your tableau and collecting. You may need to collect goats in order to pay what you know is coming up. So that's something to think about. Then there's breeding, and that comes to here. Breeding is interesting. At the end of the round, if you have 2 families in your tableau, you can take 1 more. If you have a bat in your tableau, you can take another bat. If you have if you have 1 of the wild animals, you can take another wild animal. And these will change as you go forward. And we'll flip to the 5th round. And here you see if you have 7 families, you can take 1 family. If you have 2 wild animals, you get to take 1 animal. If you have 2 goats, you get to take a third. Take 1, You can increase it by 1. So that's how you breed. I want to go back to fruit bats, which is the 3rd thing in your maintenance phase. If you have 3 bats on your tableau, we're going to pretend I do. After 1 action, just 1 action, in between worker actions, you can do I think it's called the fruit bat exchange. I can't remember what it's called, but you take 3 bats and you send them out into the night to feed. And while they're off feeding, it's going to cost you 1 food to now gain a tree and put it on your tableau. And the great thing about that is that during your maintenance phase, you simply get these bats back. On the 3rd maintenance phase, return fruit bats on night card to your tableau so you can put them back where they were. You can put them back anywhere you want, wherever there's a bat symbol. Another great way to score extra points, because now you've revealed that you can get 2 fruit in your next phase. Pardon me, your next maintenance phase. So now we're just down to the workers. As I said, in a solo game, you don't take the workers back. You start with the next round with yellow. And when you move the action space, you move it with the worker that you'd already placed. Now you are using yellow for this round. And you do the same thing. You go through that, scoring as you go, trying to build up your tableau. And as I said, when you get to all of them on here, blue, yellow, red, all out of your hand, you can now retrieve your red, move the action card, and now you're on the 4th round. And you keep going until the last round, which is red again. And if you have 12 families of the 13 that are here, you get the 13th as a bonus for your breeding. And then after that, after you tally up all these to your tableau and what you're owed, how you feed your families, and once all of that's done through your maintenance phase, you just go into final scoring. Final scoring, and I'm gonna look this up if you don't mind, just to be sure that I'm getting it right. Final scoring, the end game scoring, 1 point for each gold that you have in your possession. And card point values are important. So in my case, I only get 10. But if I were to have a full tableau, you may have 20, 25. But then again, some of these cards are a minus because they're essentially free. You're not paying for them. You're just taking an action to take one. So terrain cards can be a minus. So be careful of that too. Your supply board, again, as I said, you're taking the furthest open space to the right and calculating how many points there are. So in this case, there would be 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. You would get 6 points from your supply. And you'd write that down on the final score. You usually get more than that. But trained families are 1 bonus point each. And fruit bats, this is the important one. If there are 10 fruit bats on your tableau, every bat above that scores a point. So you have to erase those 10, and whatever bats you have in excess of 10, that's what you score. And the last thing is actually, if you've been keeping track, if you had families that you couldn't feed, it was -2 per family you couldn't feed on any given turn or any given phase that you were going through. So that adds up and will take away from your final score. And that's the final scoring. And whoever has the most points is the winner. As a solo player, you're trying to get to 120. I have not done that yet. I've gotten to 90. But I've done it without putting any pollution on my tableaus. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. I'll have to play with another strategy. But essentially, that's the game. I think I went on too long. My apologies. The quality of this game is excellent. I love the meeples. I mean, all of them. They're great. your workers, but I love the bats. I think they're fantastic. They made the families and the trees cardboard. Fair enough. You know, cardboard's cardboard, so it's nothing special, but it held up. I've played it maybe 8 times now. It's holding up perfectly. The cards are great. So the money, even though it's cardboard, it's still solid stuff. It's well done. Let's look at the theme. And with theme is this, the aesthetic as well. I think the aesthetic is beautiful. It is a pretty game. It's quite attractive. All the cards, all like even the bats at night. I mean, come on. It's you've got this background of bats, and I love the theme. And maybe I'm in my days as a writer. I wrote Nature and Wildlife, and I wrote a magazine article on bats. I have an affinity to these creatures. I think they're fabulous. In fact, we have one in our garage that's wintering in our garage. They're completely harmless. But that aside, that I think I'm drawn to the sort of bat theme. So if you look at the art really does bring out the theme, I think, anyway. And even though, think about it, like if you look at this supply board, I mean, there's a lot going on here, and there are spaces that have been put in here to house the supplies. And even though they take up so much space, I think the art and theme comes through, even with the tableaus and even the main action board here. It's quite pretty. There's some tight constraints here, and I understand trying to keep the board so that 4 players can play without it being such a table hog, and even now it would take up a lot of space. But I'd really like to see it just that little bit bigger, because I really love the theme here. It's beautiful. The bats in the forest, and villages and fields and rivers, and it's beautiful, and I'd like to see more of it. And Mr. Elkerton has done a fabulous job. It's beautiful, and my only complaint is the constraints make it doesn't add to the aesthetic. Unfortunately, it damages the aesthetic. Let me go on to theme. But let me take a second right now, and I'll probably edit this out, I hope. Oh, get rid of that dry throat. Stay hydrated, kids. Was I immersed in the theme, though? That's the thing that I have to ask myself. And it's difficult to say if you're immersed in the game versus immersed in the theme. And I was immersed in the game. No question. It held my attention, a lot of decision making. But was I immersed in the theme? I think I wasn't immersed, but I appreciated. And I stayed within the theme. So I didn't call these meeples. I didn't call these meeples. I called these workers. Pardon me, I called these goats, bats, fruit, families. You know, I didn't call them pieces. I stayed within this world. So I think that says something about the theme and how well they implemented that. And every decision that I made, to be honest with you, pulled me back into the theme, because you're thinking about, well, do I train a family, or do I take a goat? It's going to cost me this, and can I get more land? Should I get more land? Can I afford more land? What is it used for? What is it best used for? Will that get me points in the end, though? That's what started to creep in. It's all about the game. Even though I stayed within the confines of the theme, game took over. I think game took over. Still a strong theme, though. And those meeples, these ones especially, helped out tremendous. I love the bat ones. They're awesome. I love them. They're great. So that helped with theme quite a bit. So the only thing that I felt a little odd about is that we fed the families instead of paying the families, and I thought that was kind of odd in this day and age. I don't know if I'm off the mark here, but I just thought there should be a financial compensation for the work that they've done, rather than we're going to feed you, or a combination thereof. Here's 5 gold and we're going to feed you. Whatever it happens to be. Goats, fruit, whatever I choose. So that was a little odd. I'd rather have seen payment in a different way. Now for the rules were very easy. I explained it to you. I hope I didn't take too long. It really is. It's easy to absorb, and one playthrough, you're done. The rule book was excellent. It's very well written. And like every rule book, as I was going through the first playthrough, it's like, oh, what do I do here? And I went to look for something, and it took me a little time to find it, but that's every single board game I can think of. So I love the rule book and the rules. They did a really, really good job. The thing I look for in a game, in any game, is flow. So a game can be very heavy with rules and complicated, and yet once you get over that, once you learn the rules, once you get through that complication of things, there should be a flow. Atiwa has that flow. It's a fabulous flow. And this little card, the reference card, is a great reason why, because you can, if you get tripped up, oh yeah, that's what I'm doing. Here's another one that says how much stuff is worth. Here's another one that says how many players and the work phase, and just information that you need right there. If you need it, it's right at hand. Excellent for playability. It makes the flow that much better. But again, I've only played this solo, so anybody who's played this multiplayer, if I'm off on the flow idea, please let me know. I think as a solo game, this is incredible. It's so much fun. I can play this every night. I could play this and never get bored. It'll be different every time, and that's the next thing, is replayability. Because these action tiles move and are, because you take them off the board, you shuffle them for every game, right? So every game is a new set of tiles, basically, a new set of rules, and then because they move, you're getting a different one every time. Your terrain cards change constantly, because at the end of every round, if no one's taken them, you just refresh them and put 3 new ones out. That's another way that and even how you approach the game, your strategy is going to change the flow of the game and how you play. High replayability. You could play this game a lot and not get bored. And I mentioned these great mechanics, that one that I just mentioned, but I love this supply board. The fact that you start with an amount of supplies that never changes. This is it. I believe there's 8 wild animals, 13 trees, 8 fruit, 13 families, and 7 goats. Those are your supplies for the game. That's it. You're not reaching in to get more supplies. The only thing you get more of are these guys, are bats, and money. I also like that the game punishes you for not feeding your families. I wish it would be not paying your family, but in a way that's what it is. And the only thing that this is so nitpicky, I don't even know if I want to talk about it. I really don't know. That my clumsy fingers are constantly knocking things off of this supply board. And I know you have constraints that you have to work within. It's got to fit in a box, and it's got to cost a certain amount of money. There's always costs involved. I just wish it was a little bigger so that the pieces could be just a little bigger, that I could get my fingers around a little easier without knocking everything around. And it's usually trees or families. When I'm taking them out, I'm normally hitting something. So that's very nitpicky. And finally, I want to talk about the X factor of the game, that extra something that makes it unique. What makes it unique? What have they done to go above and beyond? And I think those mechanics that I talked about, the scoring mechanics, are excellent. Those are probably an X factor, but I think truly the only X factor in this game is that Uwe's name is on it, and they make it quite prominent right in the middle of the board. That is the X factor here. Other than those mechanics, there wasn't something that was so unique about it. Still a great game, though. So, I guess I have to talk about the overall score of this and what I would score it. It turned out to be 7.8 out of 10. Personally, I have to talk about, in this case, how this game affected my depression and anxiety. And I have to say that anybody who has those conditions, this is the game for you. It's very calming, and I talk about that flow. It flows very nicely. It takes you out of your head into the game. And anything that can get you that focused is I'm in 100%. So for me, this is a great game. I think it is. I haven't seen a lot about it right now. So please, I think you should go out and get this game. Especially if you're a fan of Uwe Rosenberg's. Get it. Don't even wait. Get out there today. I haven't seen any on sale, so I can't mention that. There's no place that I can see. I paid full price for it. I don't care. I'm happy. I got a great game, and I think you will too if you end up getting this game. So that's it for my first review. I hope it was okay. I'll edit it a bit. It was a lot of rambly stuff. But until next time, remember, we're all in this together. Cheers.